It was around this time that I first met Matilda. She'd been transferred from the Royal Marsden Hospital, and it was she, perhaps more than any other patient during my training, who had such a profound and lasting effect on me. Matilda arrived on Henry Ward on the afternoon of Saturday the 2nd of December 1961. She was a 15-year-old black girl with eyes like saucers, a toothy grin and a mop of fuzzy hair, tamed into miniature braids and held in place by a multitude of scarlet ribbons. She acknowledged me with a cheerful smile that vanished momentarily as she explained that her father, who was a widower, had had to return to Ghana temporarily to look after the rest of his large motherless family. Matilda was therefore on her own in a strange country. The obviously bright and well-educated youngster had a sarcoma, which is bone cancer, and had been admitted to Bath to have her right leg and her hind quarter amputated. She was noticeably in continuous pain, but she never grumbled, and in the lead up to her operation, we spent much time together and became the greatest of friends. Her pain was worse when she was moved, and she always wanted to talk to us as we gave her a bed bath to try and take her mind off the agony. She was particularly keen to talk about Christmas. "What do your family do on Christmas Day?" I asked. "We eat big chicken soup with soda pop drinks. It's always chicken at Christmas, and we always have fufu." Her eyes lit up as she spoke. "What's fufu?" I inquired. "We make fufu by pounding the cassava plant and unripe plantain together with a little water for a long time until it's a smooth paste. Then we put it in a big bowl and make little balls of the mixture with our fingers before we dip them in the soup. And it's delicious." I felt I should change the topic of conversation, as I could see I'd inadvertently made Matilda homesick, but she smiled and said it made her happy, talking about home, and she continued, "Afensia Pau is the greeting we use at Christmas, and you would reply, Afki Nikomo Imi Toyen Blo, which means, hope to see you next year." I did my best to repeat the words without any success at all after Matilda, and at least we had distracted her sufficiently to give her a bed bath without her suffering too much discomfort. She looked so little and vulnerable as we replaced the cradle on the bed to keep the bedclothes off her legs. On the day of the operation, I helped Matilda into her white gown and replaced her bedclothing with 2 red theatre blankets. She was brave, but as she looked at me, the smile that was usually on her lips faltered. Then the preoperative injection thankfully made her drowsy. I was relieved when the operating theatre orderlies arrived and lifted Matilda carefully on the canvas stretcher and onto the trolley. She'd asked if I could accompany her to the anaesthetic room, a request to which Sister agreed. This was a privilege, and the least I could do, but it was almost too painful to bear. I held her hand as the very kindly anaesthetist inserted the needle gently into her vein, and she drifted off to sleep. The operation went well as could be expected, and Matilda progressed well post-operatively, although she was still in a lot of discomfort. "I'm really lucky, she said, when the pain had diminished a little." "Why is that?" I inquired, as I was doing my best to brush the tangle out of her now unbraided hair. "Well, I've still got one leg. Some people have lost both of theirs." I couldn't reply for fear of my voice faltering. Finally, the 20th of December arrived. Christmas was on the horizon, and it was time for Matilda to return to the Royal Marsden, and I was to escort her on her journey. It was about 5 p.m. when the ambulance arrived, so it was already dark when we left. We went via Holborn, past Gamages, and headed off towards the West End, when, much to Matilda's and my surprise, the ambulance suddenly came to a halt. We looked at each other. What was going on? Had there been an accident? We were both puzzled. The 2 back doors suddenly swung open, and simultaneously the 2 middle-aged ambulance men stood to attention and, with big smiles on their faces, saluted Matilda. We were in Regent Street, in the middle of the road, holding up all the traffic. Without a word, the men covered Matilda with an extra blanket and then lifted her on her stretcher, out of the ambulance and way above, so she could see the magnificent Christmas lights lighting up one of the most well-known streets in the world. "Look," she cried, "look! There are huge illuminated crowns. There are lighted lanterns. There are twinkling stars." She could hardly contain herself and kept saying, "Oh, look, Nurse Tizzy, look, it's so beautiful. I've never seen anything like it." The motorists and taxi drivers could see what was going on, and there were calls of "Merry Christmas, Merry Christmas," and not a horn was blown with irritation or impatience. The kindness of the ambulance drivers was reenacted in Oxford Street, and again Matilda was joyful. This time the lights were different, and again the drivers in their static cars waited patiently. I saw London and Londoners in a new light that evening, and I will never, ever forget the look of pleasure on Matilda's face. When we arrived at the Royal Marsden, she turned to me and said, "I'm missing my Bart's nurses already." I didn't stay long. She whispered, "Afensia Paul," and I tried my best to reply, "Afi Nkomo Imi Tienbio," but I was just too overcome with emotion. And instead I gave her a big hug and left with tears in my eyes. I never saw her again. In spite of the amputation, the cancer had already spread, and sadly she had less than 3 months to live. But our trip and her treat had been filled with happiness and joyful memories, all thanks to those thoughtful ambulance men.